Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Right on, writers, and welcome first-time viewers to Books by Adrian Author Platform and our flagship show, Livestream Sunday. If you are new, welcome. My name is Adrian Santiago. I'm your host, and I'm very happy that you're here. Keep coming back each and every Sunday, as this is Livestream Sunday. We have an episode every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we also have a follow-up podcast on Thursdays that continues the conversation with today's guest. I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get right into it with today's guest. So let's get through the business really quickly here. Make sure that if you are not yet subscribed, that you do so now. Hit the notification bell because that lets you know when I go live. Make sure that if you are watching this on the replay, that you leave a like on the video and that you take time to leave a comment, maybe letting us know what was the story that helped you heal. Leave that in the comments below. All of these things helps the channel out. It's the easiest way to show your support for the channel is to just hit the subscribe button, leave a like on the video, and drop a comment down below. All right, let's talk about our guest today because I'm so excited that he's here. Mr. Jahmil Effend is co-author of an epic fantasy series called The High Council, the first book in the series, War in the Fallows, co-written by his brother Jahmil Effend. Tells stories in a world where royalty no longer aspires to a mere throne, they're reaching for godhood. The crazy thing about Mr. Effend is that awesome fantasy series isn't even the most interesting thing about him. Through an academic and professional career of counseling, Jahmil has developed a holistic approach to the building of a person's self-confidence and leadership skills. And we're going to find out exactly what that means. So let's get into it. Everybody go ahead and help me welcome to the show Mr. Jahmil Effend. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Dude, I'm better now. The people in the chat know that I was panicking a little bit. I was like, I think he's a no-show. I don't know what we're gonna do. Should I go on anyway? Oh my God. Yeah, I was freaking out, dude. But welcome. I'm glad you're here. Go ahead and tell the people at home a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what it is that you got going on.
Hey, so my name is Jahmil Effend. I'm from Bristol, Connecticut originally. I am an author, a podcaster. I work in student affairs at Quinnipiac University. I'm actually chaperoning a trip doing this live from Six Flags in New England. So it's pretty cool backdrop for this whole thing. I'm super excited to talk just about books and talk about writing and the whole process. I co-authored my first book with my brother, Jamar, War In The Fallows. It was a really great experience. We reached bestseller status at one point. So it was really cool to be able to make a project and see it through fruition and really do something special. And since then, I've done 40 or 50 podcast episodes. I'm looking to launch a brand new podcast coming up pretty soon, just to talk more about writing and more about the creative space. But yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool stuff. And I'm excited to just talk to you a little bit since you've been on my podcast last.
Yeah, you already had me on yours. Anybody looking for that, I'll have the link down below after the show. Because I forgot to put that in there. But yes, I've been a guest on Jahmil's show, and now I'm returning the favor. But here it's a little more interviewy, so we're gonna get into the nitty gritty with this guy. We're gonna get into the real brain of him and see what exactly it is that makes Jahmil here tick. Jahmil, let's go ahead and dive right into the interview. So, with the professional journey that you've been on, why did you need to also write novels? Where did that particular goal come from? Because that's very
So
separate from what you do professionally.
yeah, so for me it was really interesting. So last year during the pandemic, um, my brother and I, like, we were both at points that were really in flux. I kind of was working at a different college up in Boston, Massachusetts. We all had gotten partially furloughed, so I found myself with an extra couple of days a week where I was just available to really do anything. And I was like, what do I do at that time? Do I work? Do I find another job? Do I do this or that? And then I really started leaning back on writing because I had written some poetry, got published in some journals, some academic journals, and I was like finding myself really enjoying that space, but I also wanted to tell a long form story, which through poetry isn't as easy to do.
Mm.
So I was like, let's tell a fantasy story. I've always loved George R. R. Martin and Game of Thrones. I've always loved all of these different fantasy tales that I've seen throughout my life, and I was like, I want to be able to tell one. So I called my brother up. I had 4 days a week where I was just off, and I was like, let's write. And from there, it took about 2 months to actually get through that first writing process and that first book to actually like finish that first manuscript. And then after that, it was just something I wanted to continue. And then this past May and June, I was like, all right, I have a little bit of downtime. Work isn't as busy. Let me write the sequel to the book and really see what I can do. And that was a really fun experience too. So I think it kind of enhances all the work that I do in general because I do a lot of work that serves students and tells them about their dreams and how they can become the things they want to be. And I think being able to be an author and be a podcaster, along with being a professional and a father now, has really given them a little bit more of like an understanding that you can really do a lot in your
Yeah.
postgraduate life. And I think that's made a huge difference, at least in how they've responded and reacted to me.
Oh man, so much I want to unpack from that answer. When you wanted to write the book, you called up your brother. Uh, was he already a writer? Was that something he was already doing, or did you kind of pull him into it?
Yeah, so he was always a writer. My brother, he really
Dope.
he was original. Like he loved to write creatively, and he would draft manuscripts and write a ton of stories, but he never published them. So with me, my thing is always to finish and execute. So I looked at
Yeah.
him. I said, "You look at you've done this before. You've written. Let's team up and let's see if we can do something together that gets finished, that gets published, and that's professionally done." And I think when he had the opportunity, he was like, "All right, let's do it. Let's see what happens." And
That
from
sounds
there,
like
we
a
ended up
really good
making it happen.
that sounds like a really good partnership then, because if he had the experience, but he doesn't finish, as you say, he doesn't follow through, and then you are all about that follow through and that finish line. So like the two of you together kind of got it done. Are
Yeah,
you
it was
writing the
cool.
sequel by yourself, or is he back for the sequel too?
So now we're doing companion novels. Now that we have one book down under our belts, I
Oh,
feel comfortable actually writing myself now. I'm like, you know what? Let me
yeah,
tell
yeah.
this piece of the story. So I got 4 characters that you follow and When the Crown Gambles. It's just me who published that one. We talked about the overarching story of our series, obviously to make sure that stays continuity wise and shape.
Yeah.
But the individual stories that get told is really just whatever you can come up with and whatever you think is going to be creative, and
That's
then how
awesome,
we can
man.
interweave that through our books and books he writes where it hints at things that happen in books I write. I think that's what we're going to try to do with the rest of the High Council series.
That's dope. So it sounds like you guys created a universe with that first book, and now each of you are just kind of playing in the sandbox wherever you want, like on your own.
Exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Oh man, that's exciting. I want to read these books. Now you kind of answered my question about whether or not you had always been a writer. This is something that you more recently picked up, other than like you said, some poetry and stuff like that before. Can you take us through your education and where your desire to help people came from? Take us through that journey.
Yeah, so I got my bachelor's degree in accounting and management. I've always been a people person. I've always loved working with other folks, and I thought management was a really cool area to take up because it was always a team environment. How you can get the best out of the people around you, and that stuff. So I learned a lot about organizational behavior and all these other concepts that are really just about managing groups and group behavior, group think. From there, I moved on to get my master's degree in student development and higher education. So that entire thing is psychology focused. It was a counseling based program, really about helping individuals one on one. And I really found myself less so focused on just managing groups and getting an outcome from them, and more about how you can enhance someone else's life through conversation, through interaction, and through dialogue and stuff like that. So I wanted to go into the higher ed realm where I could start helping people. And a lot of that came from my experience in undergraduate, where I had some advisors and people in my life that were really helpful to giving me a really impactful college experience. Getting involved with Student Government Association and our programming board. I started a football club team where I was helping guys who never played football learn how to play the game. So it's
Nice.
always been a big piece of who I was, as far as like making sure that people can connect with me, get to know me, and that I'm helping them in some way grow and progress in their lives.
Dude, that's beautiful, man. And
Thank you.
through all
Thank
of
you.
this, professional experience and educational experience, it sounds like you've developed sort of your own way of doing things. Can you tell us a bit about your holistic approach to counseling and what sort of success you've seen from it? What makes it so uniquely you?
Yeah, I think my approach differs from a lot of people because I really have an individualized approach with counseling. The way I look at any interaction and conversation is that person is important, and that
Mm,
person is person centered. A lot of the things I talk to my students about is decisions that they can control. We talk a lot about realm of control. What can you do in the situation? Because it's less so about the environment and more about how you react to it. So that's usually my approach. And another piece to that is really like the way that I at least approach life. I approach life in a way that like you're excited. You should be happy that you have an opportunity to do something that other people might not have. With the group of students that I work with right now, they do a bunch of events. They plan this trip to Six Flags today. You constantly run into like they have so much control over the things that they want to do with their experience, and it's just about making sure that they understand that's important. They understand the value in that, and I think that that's been really successful for me as far as interacting and working with folks, and just really individualizing the experience. I'm an extrovert by nature, but depending on who I'm talking to and who I'm dealing with, I can go the whole range for anybody, just to really relate and try to make it so that they have the most comfort as possible.
so you sort of meet them on their level. If they need to be a little more chill, then you bring it down, and if they feed off of excitement, then you turn it up. Like that's what I'm getting from this is you sort of meet them at their level.
Yeah, that's always been my way. It's always been the way. Find out where someone's comfort zone is, and go there first. A lot of people try to challenge you to get out of your comfort zone, but you have to be there with them first. You have to get them to inch closer to outside of that space, and I
Yeah.
think that's where I start, and then we grow from there.
That's awesome, man. Okay, so I want to bring it back a little bit to the writing and everything. You wrote your first book with your brother. What does that process look like? Every, kind of team of co-authors sort of does it differently. How did you guys do it? How do you write a whole novel together as two people writing one thing?
So it started off with world building. We come up with the concept of the world, come up with all of the story plots. It's like a big brainstorm of what would be some crazy stories to go and explore in our world. And from there, we start to go into the next step, which is actual writing, physically doing it. For us, what we found was best was for each of us to take the lead on a POV character. So
Mhm.
he was the lead writer for Simon, and I wrote Asher and Aaron for the first book. And from there, we were able to really like kind of dive deep into the experience of those characters, and talk more about like what that would be. Um, we talked the other piece for our writing that was interesting is the editing. I was definitely the lead editor on the
I was gonna
go
ask how
back
that
and
went.
yeah, the lead editor. A lot of times I've seen that co-authors, it's somebody's good at one thing, someone wants to do another thing. So
Mm,
I really went back in the editing process and took the lead on that. I would send him back some thoughts and things that we can do to shift the story or foreshadow we could add, and that was a really cool experience. And by the time we got to the end, it ended up working out perfectly because we ended up getting the book out. We were able to get something that was successful, and we were able to tell the story the way we really wanted to. And I was happy with it. So I think that's how we really approached it. When it came to physically writing the book together, and
yeah.
plotting out the chapters, setting it timelines, and making sure we're both on the same wavelength with where everyone should be and how those stories like mesh. It was really cool.
Yeah. Man, that it sounds challenging and yet at the same time it's given me a whole two heads are better than one kind of vibe. You know what I mean? Where like we talk a lot on this channel about how many jobs an author actually has. It's
Yeah.
not just you're not just writing a book. You know, there's so much that goes into putting out a novel, and so having one guy that can focus on the editing, for example, and the other guy can focus on something else. That sounds like really good. It's funny because uh Good Omens was written by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett together. And when they were asked in interviews how they wrote that book, or even better, like people would ask them specific sections like, did you write this, like who came up with this idea or this event happening or whatever, and they never know how to answer because the way that they wrote it was one guy would write like all night, because they were on opposite ends of the world. Like one guy would write all day or all night or whatever it was, and then send email his pages to the other guy. And so while the first guy was sleeping, the other guy was rewriting everything the first guy wrote and
Yep.
adding his own stuff, and then he would send it back and he would go to sleep, and then Terry Pratchett would rewrite everything Neil Gaiman just wrote and write some more, and they just kept doing that, and so it became unrecognizable as Neil Gaiman or Terry Pratchett. It was the two of them, just they have no idea who came up with what because they rewrote each other's stuff so many times. So all that to say, there's a lot of ways to do it. For me, I was working on a graphic novel that unfortunately was never completed, but we had like a writer's room of like 5 dudes, and we were all in there pitching ideas and deciding on what was going to go into this world and the stories and the characters and all that stuff. And then like once the whole thing was plotted, then I started writing the scripts. You know what I mean? Like, so there's all kinds of different ways to do it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I like the division of labor approach. I really like that. Did one of you come up with the original idea, or did you develop it together from the ground up? I know that you brought him into the idea of writing a book, but did you already know what you were going to write, or did you guys come
So
up with it together?
yeah, so I had an original story that I wanted to tell. I had a story I wanted to tell, and it morphed over time as he got included and as we started talking about other options, other things we could do with the story.
That happens, yeah.
So yeah, so the original idea was mine, the concept that I had, but then we came to the idea of like, what is beyond king? I think that was the question we asked. What's beyond king? The next step for the king would be to become a god, right? Like to be a god. And what if and then we literally said, what if in our world they do? Like, what if in our world that's what they do? And then
that's the next rung up.
Yeah, and then we start talking about the world. Like, what if they did as young people in their 40s? What if that's when it starts? So they rule for a little bit, and then they become gods later. So they have an entire lifetime to be gods. Like, what if, or even more, like an eternity to be gods. So we started talking about that, and that became the crux of the rest of the story. And from there,
it just snowballed from there.
Yeah.
Right on. With each of you focusing on one character, I would assume, and I'm sorry I haven't read the book yet, I intend to, but I would assume that gives us 2 very distinct voices, since like, and then you took care of the editing, so he wasn't really in there like changing your stuff up too much. You know what I mean? Like he had his and yours. Man, it just sounds like a really neat experience reading that book.
It was really cool. It was cool because he has a very different writing style, and it played well to what we were trying to do with our POVs. One of my POVs is a very like sassy person that just says what they think. And they're very unfiltered. So when you're reading even the way they describe the world, it's described differently than the other character. So I was able to balance these 2 dichotomies, and he adds this third flavor in. And then after I come back and edit and do all that stuff, we start to try to make it sound as close to one voice as possible as far as author goes, formatting and things like that for sentence structure. But it ended up being really cool. But you can definitely tell Simon is written by someone else.
Yeah, right on, man. How many books are planned in the series?
In the series in total, I'm planning a trilogy for this exact story that's being told. My brother, I think he's planning another trilogy for his end of the same series. and then we have some spin-offs and some standalones that we want to do. I have one standalone that I really want to get to, so I'm trying to get to get through book 3 so I can get to the standalone and like tell this other story, because I really think it's going to be interesting.
Oh man. Do you find that your counseling knowledge and experience affects your writing? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think it's everything in my writing. A lot of people have noticed it. At least the way you dive into the psychology of a character, who is a person. And I think with my POV character specifically, especially in the second book, you start to get a real understanding of who that person is, and how these moments and things impact them so differently. I do a lot of hiding, right? You hide a lot of things underneath you as a person, and I have the characters slowly reveal all these things about themselves that you didn't know. The reason why they're skeptical, and you start to understand why they're so skeptical, and you get the reveal later in the book about it. And then what that does to your relationship with others. I have a character in the second book that has been home, but she's a gambler. She's someone that loves the thrill, and she's a thrill seeker, but she's been forced to be home and stay within the castle walls. And it's fun to see that. It's fun to watch as you understand where her thrill-seeking behaviors come from, and then you notice like the difference when she gets to the end of the book and where that takes her at the end. And all the characters have their own little stories where they have these inner demons that they battle with, and it's the same things in psychology that we talk about with individual humans, people who haven't gotten over trauma, and what that does to them, what that looks like going forward. And how you manipulate the world to be what you think it is versus what it actually is. And all of my characters and all the characters in the story, they have their own view of the world that's very noticeable to a reader. And one of the questions we got asked a lot with the first book, I've been getting asked with the second, is like, what is the truth? Because you're seeing the truth through the eyes of an individual, and in counseling, everyone's eyes are different. So,
perspective has a lot to do with context and everything. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a battle.
You mentioned George R.R. Martin, and I'm getting those vibes from what you're describing here, because that's with him having different point of view characters. I do the same thing in my novel, stealing it from him as you do. What you end up getting is, like you say, these different perspectives that change how the reader is seeing a thing happen or an event or whatever. And so like, it's really, really interesting that people are asking you, so what's the truth? Like, what actually happened? Because this guy's telling me this and this other guy's telling me this, and like, what's the, and you're like, well, that's your perspective is the third. You got to kind of figure that out, man. Why don't you tell me?
Yeah, the truth is everyone's perspective is the truth to them.
What sort of release schedule are you guys looking at?
So, War In The Fallows came out in March. When the Crown Gambles dropped October 1st. I'm looking at the next book, the third installment, coming out sometime in either January, potentially, if not March, at the latest. So anywhere within
you guys
that
are cranking them out. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think with writing, my brother, he's working on the second one to come out pretty soon. But for me, a lot of it is like I like to get the book done. So
yeah,
I think it's
get to the next one.
Written. Yeah,
right
get to
on.
the next one.
Okay, so what was the editing process like on the first book? I know that you said that you took lead on it. Did you guys also go to a professional editor after that, or are you doing this yourself? What's that process like?
So we did go to a professional editor. We hired an editor to come in, and look at the book, go through the whole thing, rip us apart, tear apart your dreams and all the great things we thought you wrote. So she went in. She was awesome. Really kind with her feedback, but very blunt and direct about what we needed to add. I think we ended up adding a ton of stuff and taking out some sections of the book that just didn't seem to fit. There was an entire storyline that she wanted that just never came to fruition and didn't have a purpose. So we ended up removing it from the first book. It was just stuff like that she really was like, I read it. It looked like you had it in there. You had a purpose at the beginning, and then that like disappeared.
It didn't go anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere. So
You know, my first draft would have been a lot longer and would have had a lot more point of view characters. But at a certain point, I decided, you know, while writing the book and I having been to an editor before, I decided to research a little bit about editing, and I realized how expensive they are. And one of the
Yep.
first things that I did was, all right, I need to take a real look at my cast and a real look at my outline, a real look at my book, and really decide who needs to be in there and cut out everybody who doesn't. Like I just started
Yeah.
chopping shit out of that book, bro. I
Yeah.
probably cut out like 3 point of view characters, maybe 4. Like I just chopped it up and got rid of a whole bunch of stuff because you know when you first start writing the book, you're so excited and you've got all these ideas and you're throwing everything in there, and then you know reality sets in. You're like, you know what? Let me scale
Yeah.
this back a little bit. This is
Yeah, let me.
bananas.
It's like I'm doing a little much. I'm doing a little much.
It's like I'm stealing from George Martin, but I'm not George Martin. I can't have like
Yeah, I don't have that
17
budget.
point of view characters. Nah, man. I can't do that. All right. So who would you say are your writing influences? We've mentioned George Martin. Who else are you drawing from, do you think?
I'd say George R. R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson. He really got me inspired with a lot of the books. I read The Way of Kings as my first Brandon Sanderson book, and I loved it. I love the way he tied the story together. I love how all of these uh, plot lines really just interwove and connected in ways that I never expected. So I'd say those two are my really big ones. Um, I love John Green as well. I think the psychology he does, and it's a very different, not fantasy, but I love the psychology of his books and what he does with character building and how he can make you love somebody that that most people wouldn't. And I think
Yeah.
that those are the authors, to me at least, who have been really impactful in my experience, especially
Some
as
real
someone who's wanted to
despicable
draw them.
characters that you're just like, oh man, I don't know why I love this guy so much. I
Yes,
really
yes.
shouldn't.
Yes, I have a character that I've written like that. A lot of people are just like, I can't stand him, but I gotta read more about him.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's just his mindset. It's just so annoying, but it's like you gotta read it. It's so hard to put down.
I don't know if I have a character that necessarily fits that. Earlier when you were talking about your character who is kind of a thrill seeker and is now like kind of trapped like within the walls, that rang to me as similar to one of my characters who was a nomad, you know, just traveled her world and was never in any one place for too long, just likes being in a new place all the time. And then like her great aunt died and left her store and her like Mac Daddy apartment. And so like now she's in a nice place. She's got a nice business. She's successful, but she's stuck and she's like trapped there and she can't fucking leave. And it's like weighing on her and yeah. So that rang true to me very much so when you're there. I want to know if I have one of these. It's probably unintentional that I'll have a character
Oh,
that
yeah.
like everybody's like, I fucking hate that guy, but I gotta keep reading. It's like, well, I didn't want you to hate him. I wanted you to like him, but okay.
Like that works too.
As long as
as
you
long as
keep
you feel
reading.
fun.
As long as you feel something and keep reading. Yeah. What movies or TV shows would you best compare to your series, or which ones have influenced you creatively? Because we don't just get our influences from our novels; we get influences from all sides of storytelling. What movies and TV show ring true to you in your work?
So to me, I loved watching the run of the 100 up to around season 5. I think they went off the rails, but the 100 was one of those shows for me that it's a sci-fi series. It has all these character perspectives, and some characters that you don't think matter eventually really do. And I think that was a series for me that really hit me when I was watching it as something that I wanted to be able to do, was tell a really intricate, detailed story. A couple other things that I think really feed well into at least what we do or what I started writing. They weren't fantasy necessarily, but they were things that I thought were important. Actually, one of them is fantasy. So Dragon Age Origins. It's not a movie, but it's a video game. I loved it. It was
There you go.
one of the most. It was one of the most detailed stories I've ever experienced in a medieval setting, and it was so well done that that's another one that I'd say is definitely top tier as far as impacting me. it got me really invested in fantasy and the stories that you can tell. I would say I love stories like The Matrix, things that have really cool twists and plot turns and all types of weird things. My stories are also somewhat that, with things you can never expect or things that are subtly hinted at that you just didn't see the first time. Those things all influence the work that I put out.
Yeah. So, it's funny because I think all the time about movies influencing my writing, TV shows influencing my writing. I forget that video games influence it too, because I can pick out stuff in my novel that I've ripped out of some video games that I've played. Storytelling wise, The Last of Us is a
Oh,
big influence. I
top tier.
love that game. I haven't played the second one yet, but that first one, oh my god, changed my life. And then the other one was I think it's called Hard Rain. Have you ever played Hard Rain? It's a murder mystery. It's a serial killer murder
Heavy,
mystery.
heavy rain.
Heavy Rain, Heavy
Heavy
Rain.
rain.
Thank you.
Yes,
Hard Rain was
I
that
have
was
played
that
heavy
movie with
rain.
Christian Slater.
Yeah.
Heavy Rain. Yes.
Oh, that is.
The FBI character with the glasses that like becomes his office or like whatever he wants, and he has like an imaginary ball that he plays with and stuff. This is all like that like led to the technology in my book. Like that idea was like, oh, I'm gonna run with that and just go with that. It's yeah, Heavy Rain is a really good one. That
Yeah,
that
it's really
game,
good.
it's a movie. It's a noir movie basically, but you get to experience it as a player. Love it.
Yeah.
Last of Us Part 1 and 2 changed my life for sure. Great taste in games. Oh man. All right. So what plans do you have maybe of adapting your books into other mediums? You guys thinking about that at all?
Well, always, always. I'm always thinking about what ways can I get this story told. I would love to do a film. I think our story is perfect for film. I know some people who work in the film world, so I'm trying to tap into them after the series
Nice.
is completed and after the trilogy's done, um, just to
Smart.
like get that ball rolling because it takes time. And I
Yeah.
think pitching the script. I know actually writing it in a form that makes sense for TV or for film. It's a whole process, and screenwriting is a process. Learning that is another big piece of what I want to do. Because I think the story is really interesting. I think the ending and conclusion is of this last book is going to be just insane. I think it's just going to be one of those things where people are going to feel the weight of the story. I think the book two, the way it ends, people felt the weight of the book two ending already, and they know that what it's going to lead to is going to be somewhere that they could have never seen in the first book.
Man. All right, man. It's gonna be bananas. I can tell. Do you have any plans to write stuff outside of the High Council series in that
Absolutely.
whole world?
Absolutely. I already have a list of storylines and I have a world building thing for this concept that I really want to dive into. I
Nice.
want to finish the High Council series first because I feel like I should finish the trilogy out, and then I want to get some standalones. But the standalones can happen during the other writing process. So after book three comes out for the High Council series, then I'm really gonna dive into this other series because I think it has an interesting premise. It has a very interesting political structure already, and I'm excited to just be able to talk a little bit more about it once I get in the writing process.
Are you gonna be writing in any other genres besides fantasy?
Besides fantasy, potentially. I'm not opposed to sci-fi. I feel like I have to learn a little bit more. Um, some contemporary stuff I'm not opposed to, but fantasy is probably where I'm gonna stay home for quite a while. I'll
You're
venture
gonna live
out
there for a little
someday,
while.
but yeah, I'm gonna live here in the fantasy world for a little bit longer.
What is your biggest weakness as a writer?
I honestly, it's prose. It's always prose. I think for me, it's been the most difficult piece to really adjust to. From book one to book two, there's a noticeable difference. I really focused a lot of attention during the editing process on prose and making sure that things sounded really good and things were
Mm,
described very well. Now I carry like on my notes on my phone. I have constant lines of dialogue and lines of description of just prose for later books and later things. So I constantly have worked on that. The vocabulary has been expanded widely. I cannot tell you how many words I know now. It's insane. I'm going really in the last 7 months. I feel like I'm taking a full English course because I've just been diving into learning more words, more ways to say things. I
That's
think
what's up, man.
the first book felt like to me more repetitive than it needed to be, especially as I look at the second book and how much I was able to do by just knowing more and tackling it with
Having
intensity.
unique words for each situation, like not having to
Yes.
repeat the same thing over. Yeah, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference.
Expand that vocabulary. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So prose is definitely the area of weakness. I think I'm attacking it as best as I can. I know for the third book, I'm excited because I feel like I'm starting to hit a place where if you read book 1 and you thought it was good for the story, you're going to read book 2 and feel like it's good for the writing. And then by the time you get to book 3, you're going to feel like the whole package is there.
I like it. What's your biggest strength as a writer?
Plot twist. I have a great mind for narrative in my head. I can connect the story in ways that I think a lot of people might struggle with, and it's been exciting. It's been fun to really pull everything together at once and make it cohesive and trick people into thinking that the story is one thing. Misleading. The red herrings that I put in books, you'll just feel like this is what happens. This is logically what happens next, and then by the time you get to the point, you realize that the breadcrumbs led somewhere entirely different than you were walking. So that's been my strength. That's my biggest strength for sure.
I like it. All right, bro. Let's we got through that interview real quick. Let's dive into the topic for the day.
Awesome.
So I can definitely point to a few books that helped me through tough times or helped me heal in some way, and others that have given me insight into myself, and others that gave me dreams to shoot for. And so, do you write your books with any of this in mind? Are you trying to reach people through your books, or do you think that effect on the reader is more subconscious and unintentional, and you're just trying to entertain? How do you feel about all that?
So for me, most of my stories, or my last 2 books, they really come from the overall story, and the big plot is always something about a deeper piece of you. I feel like you can't tell stories you can't tell a story properly without making sure there's a moral base or foundation to it, even if it's unintentional. There's always a meaning. So the first book is really about fatherhood and the role that a father plays in a person's life. You follow these 3 kings. They all have different ranging fathers. No father is perfect, but you see what happens when you have an absent father and where that leads. You see what happens when you have an overbearing father and where that leads. And when you have one that is there but isn't necessarily accessible all the time, and you see where that leads. And I think that was really fun to kind of dive into. And by the end of it, you really do get the feeling like, wow, they all have different upbringings, and a lot of it's based off of who their parent was, or how their parent involved themselves. And the second book, it's really about secrets and the lies we tell ourselves. It's a story about you as a person and what that means when you decide to share revelations and secrets about yourself, things that were hidden once that become light, and what that does to your life and how those things can change everything fundamentally. And I think that's a really fun story to explore and explain. And it's fun, obviously, through writing, because you get to create characters, you get to create these intricate storylines, and then the stuff is weeded inside of it. But it was fun to be able to see that, like, what happens when the truth comes out. What happens when you enter a situation that you thought you had all this baggage that no one knew about. What happens when everyone finds out? And I think that was the fun about the second book. And I always think of those kind of things as I'm writing.
Right on, man. And your readers, have you gotten feedback from your readers that, you know, lets you know that you're on the right track with this kind of thing? Is it are you seeing success in your sort of message reaching people?
Yeah, I think a lot of people who read the book, they realize like this person was messed up all because of this situation or because of this person, this interaction, this relationship. The most prominent was Asher and his father Joss in the first book. Their relationship is just such a prominent piece of the story, even though it only exists in 4 chapters of the book or 3 chapters of the book. So it's like you see the impact that his father has on him, even when his father's not present. And there's stuff like that that I think people were really able to tell me afterwards, like, yo, I felt that because I've been in situations where someone's overbearing. In the second book, it's like, I feel lied to. I've been lied to. I know what that's like when everything comes up, like everything comes to light. And it's crazy because the reaction of the character is the reaction that you would have if a secret you had came out. So there's stuff like that that's been really nice to hear as an author, just to know that you're writing something that actually matters and that people care to read.
Dude, I can think of so many well, father son stuff in particular always tends to get me. When
Mm,
before I was a father, it would get me as a son. My father and I have a very close relationship. And any like really deep emotional father son storylines are gonna bring the waterworks, bro. And
yeah.
now they get me as a father. Now I'm a
Mm,
father, and I see those father son moments, and now I'm looking at it from a completely different perspective, and I cry even harder. So
mm.
I'm even more excited to be reading your book sometime soon, man, because like I said, that father son stuff, man, that's right up my alley. That's right up my
Yeah.
alley. You're at Six Flags, right? I can
Yes.
hear the fun. I can hear the fun everywhere.
So all the energy over here.
All right, man. We're gonna take a couple of questions from the chat. All right. So Adam asks, "What is your favorite thing about the writing process?" I think I know, but you go ahead.
My favorite thing about the writing process is honestly world building and
Great.
developing the story for the world. When you get to choose the plot that you want to go after and the plot line that you're trying to reach, I always come up with the ending first. So for me, it's just world building and then coming up with that plot to get me to the end of the book. That's always been the most fun, and it's still the most fun. I don't even like to write until I know what I want to do, how I want the story to end. So it's
Yeah,
the most
man.
fun for me.
Creation. I read a quote somewhere. I can't remember what writer said it, but something about how a blank page or a blank screen, if you're typing on the screen, is God's way of telling you how hard it is to be God.
Mm,
When you
that's
have to like
beautiful.
create a whole world and populate it with real living breathing characters, like that's when you understand number one how hard it is to be God, but also probably how fun, you
Yeah.
know? Because the creation, like the play, that's why I'm so excited about what you and your brother are doing, because like I said, you guys created a sandbox and now you guys just get to play in it,
Oh yeah.
and that just sounds so awesome. What advice would you give a writer who is struggling with a first draft? It probably depends on what part of the process they're struggling with, but I guess in broad terms, what's your advice for first time writers struggling with a first draft?
For me, if you're struggling with the first draft, just keep writing. Um, it doesn't have to be good the first time. Like if you don't have a good plot twist, or if this isn't interesting, if a scene doesn't feel right, you're gonna go back and edit it. So
Mm.
to me, it's always just keep writing. Your first draft, that first manuscript is always tough. So if you have a manuscript that you're working on, just keep writing, push through, and even if it's bad, that's better than nothing. The same way you just made that you're God creating a world. Um, God might have been wrong a couple times and had to, change things around, made the rocks, and then the trees the trees. He's like, oh, like you probably had to figure things out too, where you want to place things. So
You know,
you don't have to be perfect the first time.
that first draft is supposed to be a mess. You know,
Yeah.
it just is. I finished my first draft. I'm editing it now. I'm about halfway through editing, and I have a cool story. I'm really proud of my story. I'm really proud of my characters. I can't wait to put this book out there. But this first draft is a mess. Like I need to fix the heck out of it. So just know that that's gonna happen. Just get the thing like you said, get the thing done. Put one word in front of the other, even if it's bad. You can't edit a blank page. You
Yep.
can edit the hell out of a bad, first manuscript. You can edit the hell out of it. So yeah, man, just get it done. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Just get to the end, and then you can get in there and just fix stuff, chop stuff out, create whole
Yeah.
new chapters, whatever you
Yeah,
need.
and the important thing to know is that the editing process is long. So it's
Yeah,
like it's long. It's not a short process. Like if it took you 2 months to write the book, it might take you 2 months to edit it. So to me, it's just keep writing, get it done.
yeah. I mean, it took me the better part of a year to write this first draft. Editing it is going to take a while. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's a process. Um, I was gonna ask this, but Adam beat me to it. Do you believe in writer's block? And if so, how do you combat it?
So I do not believe in writer's block. I think that it's just a whether or not you're writing. If you're writing forward, you're gonna get more words.
Mm.
If you don't have anything good to say or any good ideas, a lot of times you're just not having the idea that you want. Everyone wants the great grand plot twist. They want the great description. They want the perfect word. Writer's block to me is like I don't know where to take the story. I haven't experienced it partly because I let my characters kind of take the wheel. If I have a character that's a gambler and they want to gamble on archery right now, then they're gambling on archery. It's not up to me what that scene's gonna what that scene's gonna be necessarily. I'm let the character kind of guide it. And I think writer's block comes into play when you have a specific direction that you want to go and you don't know how to get there.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a bit of a pantser then, right? Like you just kind of, write as you go, like make it up as you're going.
So
I
I
do. Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, I'm partly pantser, but partly but I do an outline. I do an outline before every chapter.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do an outline before every chapter, so I know where things are supposed to eventually get to. I just don't know what they're gonna do in between all those moments.
Yeah.
Like they have a
See,
conversation, these two are in the room. I don't know what they're gonna talk about yet.
I've got an outline for my novel. I've got an outline for my series. And, I'm like you. I don't believe that writer's block is a real thing. I think we're misinterpreting something else, another problem. And you're calling it writer's block. And you're, by calling it writer's block, you're giving it power and letting it like control you. You can power through any of this. So here's
Yeah.
what I always say. Number one, if your writer's block is I have no ideas, I don't know what to write, I just want to write something but I don't know what to write, then that's fine. Like sit down, do some free writing, like literally stream of consciousness free writing, like get your noodle going, whatever it is. Even if it's terrible, like you wrote something and every day you can write a little something else and you'll get through it. Now, if you're writing a novel and you're gonna come at me and tell me that you have writer's block, bro, you did not prepare.
Yeah.
Writing, go do your outline. If you're struggling with writer's block, that's because you didn't outline. Go do your outline, and then when you're done with your outline, you'll magically never have writer's block again. Because every time you feel like you have writer's block, you can just look at your outline
Yeah,
and
you
go,
know exactly where to go.
that's what I'm supposed to be writing today. Okay. And you can just go forward from there. There's no such thing, man. Power through it. Write
Yep.
one word in front of the other until it's done.
Yeah.
What about imposter syndrome? We talk a lot about imposter syndrome on this channel. How do you feel about imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome's real. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's a real thing in many careers, in many fields. Anyone that's new typically might feel imposter syndrome if you haven't done something before. So, to me, the best way to combat imposter syndrome is just to recognize that your work is just as valid as someone else's. No matter if you have one book published, no books published, and you're just working on a manuscript, you're an author once you start writing and once you start publishing. Once you start getting your work out there, you're an author. So you have to just own it, own the label, own what it comes with. And if someone tells you otherwise, they're not doing the work. They're not sitting in front of the computer typing every day. They're not doing the podcast episode. They're not doing that. It's you. So definitely, imposter syndrome is real. People feel like they don't belong in the space. Even some of the biggest people don't feel like they belong in the space when they get there. So just know it's something that you're gonna get through. But the sooner you recognize that you belong, the better off you are.
I agree, man. And the other thing about imposter syndrome is that when we're talking specifically about authors who are feeling it, I just like to remind them that every accomplished author who has any kind of accolades will tell you the same thing. When you're new, steal from everybody. Steal from everybody that you read, everybody that you like. You want to write like Neil Gaiman? Write like Neil Gaiman. You know, you like what George Martin is doing? Write like George Martin, because you can learn from what they're doing and develop your own style on your own terms over time. Like that's how you do it. You know, you emulate who you admire and you figure out how it is that they do, and then you're going to start admiring other people and bringing in their flavors, and before you know it, you've created your own thing.
You have all these different elements.
Yeah, you're going to feel imposter syndrome during that process, but it's part of the author process. It's part of finding your voice, your style. It's, you know, just move forward, man. Keep it going. Okay, well, let's see. I think, shocker, we've gotten through everything. I think we have touched upon everything. Jahmil, I'm going to give you the floor for a minute here. Go ahead and let us know what you have coming up, anything you want to, you know, promote or anything. I know that your second book recently came out, right? On the 1st?
Yes. So October 1st.
All right, tell everybody about that.
Yeah, I dropped When the Crown Gambles. It's book 2 of the High Council series. It's out now, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble's, paperback and ebook. You can also expect the audiobook to be coming sometime either next month or before the year is over. You can check me out on my podcast, Books by Authors podcast, which will be changing over pretty soon to be rebranded to the Scribble Notes podcast. I'm excited to really start that journey and interviewing different creatives from all over. It's going to be a lot more laid back. It'll definitely be still author interviews and such, but we'll also include just any random notes that I have, thoughts that I have throughout episodes and stuff like that. It will have a different structure, but it'll be really fun, really entertaining and engaging. But definitely pick up the book, When the Crown Gambles. It's available now. It's been really well received by everyone that's been reading it. I definitely am excited to see how people feel about the ending of the story, how people feel about the ending of these characters. I'm working on book 3, starting in November for NaNoWriMo, so you'll see plenty of updates on that. If you follow me on Instagram, at Inspired by Jahmil, you'll be able to get all the updates about things going on in my world and in my life.
That's awesome, man. All his links are down below, everybody. Go check him out. And what about, you know, professionally with what you do with your counseling? Is there anything you want to promote from that or you know, pitch to anybody?
Yeah, so I've been loving my experience at Quinnipiac. I've been going around to some schools doing some presentations and things like that. So if you ever need someone to come speak and do a speaking engagement, teach on some topics, I have a ton of experience in anything that's about student development. So yeah, hit me up. My website, same thing, is www.inspiredbyjamil.com.
Awesome. Everybody at home, thank you so much for being here. Keep in mind that Jahmil and I will be recording a podcast episode after this, and that's going to premiere on this channel on Thursday, the 21st. Yeah, that's my birthday. Thursday, the 21st. That morning at 11 a.m., the video version of the podcast will be available on this channel. The audio versions are available as of that morning. As of midnight, you can get them on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcasts. Jahmil, thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much. Stick around. We're going to do the other show in a minute. And for everybody at home, again, thank you very much for being here. Right on, writers, and have a good one. We'll see you Thursday for the podcast.
Thanks.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.